ZZ as a method has a lot of different variants, a lot of different ways to go about ending the solve, and it's not hard to figure out which one of these is optimal for speed. It's the ZBLL one. But which of them is optimal for swag? Yeah, swag, it's my namesake, I got it, you want it, let's talk about it. So I wanted to make a tier list of all of the different variants based off of swag, but that might prove a little difficult. You see, most tier list videos, they're made by people on computers who screen record it. I don't actually have a computer, I'm based entirely on mobile, and screen recording mobile is... yeah. So I'm probably just going to do some janky editing on this side of the screen or something. I don't know what I'm going to do. Anyway, ZZ variants ranked by swag. Now, unless specifically stated, most variants are to do with the last slot and last layer, so that's what we're going to be talking about with this. But if I want to make this tier list, I'm going to need a baseline. And what could be a better baseline than the base method? OCLL, PLL. A slightly more complicated way of saying OLL, PLL. You finish your F2L normally, you orient the last face, you do PLL. Very simple, very easy. There's only 28 unique cases, 7 for OCLL, 21 for PLL. It's quite good for speed, but it's rather boring, although it's surprisingly elegant. So I think for swag, this one gets a C tier. Nice baseline, plop somewhere in the middle, it's pretty good, kind of boring, we'll throw it in the middle. Now, let's get going down alphabetically. ZZA is another fairly simple variant. You again just do the F2L completely normally, but here, instead of doing OLL and PLL, you just end the solve off with ZBLL. It's kind of a boring method in terms of the theory. Oh wow, we're taking the last two steps, cramming them into one, ain't that creative? But I think just the sheer clout you get from knowing full ZBLL definitely qualifies putting this in around about A tier. I actually check my tier list, I mean. I need the swag tier list on hand. ZZB is different entirely. This is the first variant where you do have to think about your last slot. You need to insert the last pair in a way that permutes two opposite edges on the last layer. This is called phasing. It reduces the amount of ZBLL cases to just ZZLL cases, so 169 algs. And it allows you to learn a lot less algs for a one-lock last layer. But it's not very good. I mean, phasing is slow, it's move count inefficient, and the ZBLLs it reduced to they just suck. It's not cool in terms of cube theory, it's slow, it's just D tier. Just D tier. ZZC feels very cool. What you do in ZZC is an alg called OLS, or Orient Last Slot. It's like winter variation on crack. Instead of orienting everything at the end when you have a built pair, you just do it no matter what. It's a cool variant. It's kind of a brute force approach to the whole skipping a step idea with OLL, but I think that it's honestly cool enough and has high enough skip odds to have a pretty high swag rating. I'll put this at the top of B tier. ZZCT. Really cool cube theory. Feels amazing to do. And it's your boy's main variant. You can feel the swag emanating from this already. It abuses things like rotational symmetry to minimize the amount of cases that you need to force a last layer skipping 2 steps. Well, last layer skips. It's very cool. 95 distinct TSLE cases that are solved intuitively with triggers. These triggers are the same thing you use for regular F2L pairs and how you insert them. RU prime, R prime, RU R, RU2, R prime. After that, this is where the whole rotational symmetry thing comes in. You know, TTLL. It's 72 algs, the size of one ZBLL set, and you put in this corner into the F2L slot while finishing everything, because TSLE orients the 5 corners while putting the edge in. And just like that, with under 200 algs, you can do your last slot in 2 looks, while also doing your last layer. It has pretty decent luck as well, and there's a lot of different ways to get lucky. You can get lucky from having a TSLE case that's 1 trigger long, or 2 triggers long, or skipping TSLE. You can get a TTLL that's soon or anti-soon but with only R2s. you can skip TTL 1 out of 360 chance. There's a lot of luck to be had in this method, so you get a lot of neat singles. This right here, this variant, this is an S tier, baby. Now this leads directly into the next variant, C++. It is option select between C and CT. And it's really the first option select variant that we've seen like put into practice, which is really cool to see. The theory behind it, I don't fully understand. It almost seems like a great coincidence. The worst OLS cases are the best TSLE cases, and the worst TSLE cases are the best OLS cases, which means that they pretty much, like as two variants put together for one option select, they cover each other's weak points. This pretty easily gets A tier swag right here. I'd say it's a little bit behind the full ZBLL clout because it's a lot less algs, but it's just so cool in terms of theory that having less clout, like it's made up for. It is made up for. ZZD is another variant with very cool cube theory. It revolves around the ZBLL subset 2GLL, which is 84 algs, and it's all of the ZBLL cases that already have corner permutation solved. And what makes these special is that they can all be solved 2gen, completely R and U moves. But I mean, we don't do that. We throw some S moves in, right, just to improve the algs when you have bad ones. But for the most part, they're all nice. You get a lot of RU gen algs. It's very TPS spammy, very ergonomic, and it's considered the best subset of ZBLL. So what ZZD aims to do is force it. You get to last slot and you recognize corner permutation by twisting corners in your mind. And then you do CPLS, and when you do CPLS, you're guaranteed to get a 2GLL case that can be solved. Well, 2gen, of course. This is basically ZZB, but swagger in every way. You get better algs, you have lower cases for your last set, although you have to learn a lot of CPLS cases, corner permutation last slot. But it has way cooler theory. Like, come on. So, honestly, this gets an A tier as well. ZZDT was a collaboration between Raven and Leuma ZZ, and what it aims to do is combine D and CT. You see, all of the best cases for the last step of CT happen to have corner permutation solved, so if we insert the edge while permuting corners, and then orient everything, and that's not how you orient everything, that's how you orient everything, you will guaranteed get the best set for the last slot cases. Very cool in theory. There's a lot of algs, there's a lot of janky recognition, you know, you have to recognize corner permutation. Honestly, I'm feeling a B tier on this one. We can just throw this behind C. Very cool, very interesting to see that this is a possibility to combine these two variants, so shout out to Raven and Leuma for that, but I'm just kind of only feeling a B tier on this one. Next up is a variant called ZZ Ghost, which is very unique in its approach and very interesting. You see, we decided to leave the EO line for last for this one. You start out by building your left block. Now, you know, most variants use EO cross these days, but EO line works best for Ghost. So we have to build blocks again. So you do your left block first, and then you follow that up with your right block. And one of the benefits of ZZ Ghost is that because you don't have your EO line solved, you can use this M slice. And then you do your ZBLL. Now I don't know ZBLL, so I'll be doing this in kind of 2 looks. And then after that, you're left to solve your EO line, so you'd have to orient edges and solve the line. Now, at this point you might be thinking, that sounds a lot like Ru, if instead of left and right you just do first and second block, instead of your ZBLL you have CMLL, and then EO line would just be last 6 edges, right? Well, to that we say, shut up, it's not Ru, it's ZZ Ghost, we promise. B tier. ZZ-Porky. Oh boy, this is where it gets fun. You see, back in the day, ZBLL wasn't thought to be viable, it was thought it was too big of an alg set. So, among ZZ solvers, there was more focus on 2gen reduction. You see, Porky isn't a last slot, last layer variant. After your EO line, because it was EO line back in those days because people were still bad, you would not go straight to solving your right block, you would instead place the last 2 corners in their position on the D layer. You wouldn't orient them necessarily, but you would place them. And then, after having placed them, you would need to permute the remaining corners on top. Then you would solve your right block, and you'd be left with the 2-gen last layer that we were talking about before with ZZD. Except you're taking a break in the middle of F2L to then solve like pseudo pairs, like place the corners. I mean, if you're doing that, you might as well just solve the pair. And then you're doing a last layer alg on top, so you can force a 1-look last layer later. Just do OCLL, PLL. It's literally this method, but better and less alg. The only downside is you don't get 2-gen last layer, but bro, who cares at this point? Porky is... Look, I know a ZZ solver called Porky, and he brings this variant up a bit by namesake. Like, I can't bring myself to put it in D tier, so I'll put it at the bottom of C. I'm sorry, Porky. ZZ-OS. The OS stands for option select. You learn ZBLL, TTLL, you learn some OLS sets, the best ones. And you option select in your solves. Some solves will be skipping OLL, some solves you'll be doing 1-look last layer, some solves you might be skipping TSLE and just going straight to a TTLL, or doing an easy TSLE and going into TTLL. You will have to be a beast for the amount of algs that you will learn, and it will be kind of an optimal method in theory. It's really cool when you think about it, being able to option select between that many different things and knowing them all in full. God damn, that drip swag. That's an S tier. ZZ top. F tier, mate, get it out of here. Nope, none of that.